All righty. Happy Saturday or Sunday, wherever you are in the world. It's me, Night Owl, or you can call me Jesse. Back again for another Lucid Deep Dive. We're joined tonight by a few of my comrades from the Lucid Dreaming Initiative, Amina from the Dream World podcast, as well as Curious Box. And today we're going to be talking about dream control. So I'll allow the other two guests to introduce themselves and then we'll get right into it.
Cool, thank you. So yeah, my name is Amina, um, and I'm not able to get on the camera. So thank you, Night Owl, for blessing us with your visual presence. So yeah, I have the Dream World podcast. I've been a lucid dreamer like pretty much my whole life, and then I started like learning about how to induce lucid dreams and get deeper into dream work and explore consciousness in other ways as well. So yeah, I'm just deep in the community and I love talking about this and having conversations like this and yeah, just spreading the information to people about, how to learn to work with their dreams. So I'm excited to be here.
All right. Oh, hello. Seems like we have a little bit of a second guest here. But besides, I'm curious. Some people know me by that at least. I'll stick with that for today. Been lucid dreaming for like 4 years now, and I have quite a bit of expertise on the use of language as it comes to the relationship with getting people into a field like this, and a lot more to do with motivation and neurolinguistic programming. And by the way, we do have Crystal, who is backstage, so if you'd like to invite her on, that might be a little bit helpful.
Oh, great. I don't see her in the thing.
Yeah, I don't see her there either. She'll probably pop back in. But great, curious. I heard you mention neurolinguistic programming as it pertains to dream control. And I know you and I could go back and forth about RIS all night. But please, for our audience, if they're not familiar, could you provide just a brief description of what that term is and how it applies?
Ooh, a brief description. That's a challenging question for me because the entire idea of NLP isn't brief. But if I were to sum it up in one sentence, it's the usage of language to create change within people's minds.
Using language to create change in people's minds. Okay, I agree with that. And that maybe we'll take it a little bit deeper. So, what comes to mind when you use the language dream control? And I'll give you a second to think. For me, dream control implies that you're not in control. I've heard Amina on her Dream World podcast mention many a times that there seems to be an unconscious creation. I'm not sure. She'll probably word it better than I will. But basically, the dream creates itself, where there's an architect behind the dream, and that you may be able to even attain lucidity without the aspects of control. So perhaps full control is somewhere along the sliding scale of lucidity. Is that fair to say?
Oh yes, for sure. I definitely have to say, like lucid dreaming, when we talk about the idea of lucidity, well, yes, on one hand, you could say it is a binary thing, whether you're aware or not. But at the same time, there are different degrees of
You
lucidity.
want to try?
As I often hear Scaffold say a lot, it's almost like a dimmer switch on a light, right? And the second thing that you said about that, the idea that there's an architect behind our lucid dreams. We can hear you, Night Owl.
Oh, sorry, guys.
So about that, I was talking a little bit about the architect, right, or the dreamer who is behind the dreams. Although we might say that lucid dreaming is specifically geared toward the idea of being aware inside a lucid dream, one of the main appeals that we have all the time, and that we lure a lot of beginners in with, is the idea that you can control the dream and you can do whatever you'd like in it. But at the same time, I even hear Robert Wagner say something about the fact that the dreamer, the sailor does not control the sea, right? So there's that part of us, there's that part of our minds who is controlling the dream, and there's everything else that you're not thinking of, or the unconscious, that is maybe working a little bit behind the scenes. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I love that. And honestly, honestly, I love that quote, and it's also sometimes you can control the ship, but not the sea. And from what I've noticed too is like you guys said, there's varying levels of dream control, and it's kind of like the free will argument to me. It's like, do we really have free will? Are we really controlling things, or is there something bigger at play? And a lot of dreams I've noticed kind of have their own narrative, and when I don't control the dream, even if I'm fully lucid, I just go along with it and I observe. And I'm sure there's projections of my thoughts that influence the dream narrative. But sometimes I just see what the dream has to bring to me, like what that bigger, energy at play is. But controlling your dreams is fun. I think it's a practice, like a skill, in addition to lucid dreaming, that brings a lot of interesting results. I mean, like the practice of dream yoga, it's like one of the stages, being able to do different things in your dream, like starting off making objects bigger or smaller, like simple things like that. So it's really like magical, isn't it?
Yeah, awesome quote. I think that the sailor and the sea metaphor speaks to what I refer to in a Jungian sense as shadow work. All the things that you're not unconscious of still play a role in who you are as a person, the way you think, and especially the way you dream, in my opinion. But I noticed we did have a few more people join us on stage. Welcome to Red and Crystal. We'll allow you guys to sort of introduce yourselves and just give a brief description about what you think dream control means.
All right, so I guess I'll introduce myself. Well, I guess for dream control, my main thought is, I guess any influence you have over it, like down to even walking or just anything you do in dreams. But what I usually mean when I say dream controls is, when you do stuff that isn't allowed in the rules of the world you're in. That's the main thing we're referencing, or at least that I'm referencing with dream control. But yeah, it's literally anything you do.
Okay. I'd like to go a little bit deeper on that. So maybe before Crystal says something. So would you say that a dream in which you're not lucid, Red, but you're still exerting action, you're still doing something, let's say playing at the park, for example,
Yeah.
would that be a dream in which you're exhibiting control?
I would say that's very technically dream control, just because there's also those type of dreams where it's like you're watching a movie or you're essentially following a dream character. So like even if it's not willingly controlling a dream, it's still some type of influence changing it.
Would you mind if I go ahead and ask you the question of whether it is truly dream control if it isn't conscious dream control? Because in our dreams, right, we let everything play out by the dreamer. But at the same time, when we jump into a lucid dream, we have that prospect of dream control that is outside from a regular dream. So if I were to ask you, is there a difference really there when we say in a regular dream, can you have dream control if it isn't conscious dream control?
I mean, yeah, like I'm saying, usually when I'm referencing dream control, it is willingly controlling a dream in a way that is not usual for that world's rules. So, usually I would reference dream control like not being any of that. But I say technically, if you're controlling the dream, well, dream control, like at a very technical way.
All right, thank you. I very much appreciate that. Crystal, do you have any thoughts on the topic?
Not really. I mean, I can just, first of all, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I could just start off with saying dream control just works by taking advantage of the dream formation process on a very fundamental level. I know I'm parroting someone here.
Yeah.
Just don't call me out on it. I'm calling myself out. But and then my understanding is that you can define it in like sort of many different levels and ways, because you can be like conscious of the fact that you're controlling it, and you can be not conscious of the fact that you're controlling it, but it is still dream control, because the formation that would make any formation of dreams dream control then to some extent. I do not know. But anyway, welcome DJ, That's great to see you
Oh, yeah,
here.
welcome.
Hello.
You can go ahead and do what we just did, which is sort of introduce ourselves and say what you think dream control is, if you want to.
Okay. Yeah, I'm DJ Dreams. The server. I'm mostly on the Discord server Omni Lucid. Part of the group that started that. Been lucid dreaming since I was 6 years old. So I guess like 30 years now. But not continually. But yeah. So I mean, I think dream control, in my opinion, would be consciously changing the dream. I know there's, I guess I would, there's like a strict definition in my mind and then kind of a more loose definition. And the more strict one is like conscious change, consciously changing something. And then the looser definition would be like influencing the dream somehow. But the reason why it's a little bit looser is because a non-lucid dream, you're a character. And so you're kind of seeing that memory as an embodiment of yourself, but I wouldn't see that strictly speaking as control. So I would, strictly speaking, I would say it's consciously changing something in the dream. And that could, by the way,
I agree with that, Rune.
that can
I'm sorry,
happen.
TJ.
Sorry. You can do that while you're awake too. It's like incubation. You can consciously change your dreams while you're awake. Doesn't have to be within the dream.
Do we all agree on this? Or does anyone want to jump in and give an alternative definition? As for like,
I would want to say that, like a lot of things in lucid dreaming, I feel like DJ has kind of summed it up in a nice way. We like to have our strict definitions, but we put that in practice and in science maybe if we want to do an experiment or something like this. But besides, I think I would want to leave it open to the interpretation of one's own dream. So we'll keep it a little bit more fickle there.
Yeah, like
All right, that makes sense. So now to sort of move on from the definition, I'm interested in what we think about how it actually works, which is kind of where some of this gets juicy. And unfortunately, I missed like the first 5 minutes of the stream, so I don't know exactly what you guys have gone into already, but how it actually works, or how it can be not necessarily as well just how it works technically, but also how we make use of how it works in order to use it in ways that we want to, is a very good topic. So does someone have something they want to start off with?
Yeah, I do. So I think a big factor of dream control is limiting beliefs and how confident you are in what you're trying to do. So, like in the dream space, if you're trying to do something like go somewhere or summon somebody, the more confident you are in those attempts, the more likely it is to happen. And a lot of times dreams are thought responsive. So like if we're thinking something, like a dream character might project that thought back onto us. Like one time I literally asked a dream character how to make $1 million, and it repeated back to me the same thing. Like, how do I make $1 million? I was like, that's not helpful. So, sometimes it doesn't do what you want it to do. Dream control is also a matter of persistence and patience, because like we said earlier, sometimes the dream does its own thing and what you're trying to do doesn't necessarily work because the laws of physics aren't the same. So it's practice and confidence is a big thing.
Yeah, Amina, that's a great answer. I love how you address that. Even through skill and practice, it might not always work. So try it out for yourself. Don't let us, affect your schema. Experiment what works for you. But just to play off of her idea about confidence, I think it's more than that. I think it's expectation. If you want to exert dream control, you have to expect what you're doing to work. And just to kind of use an example, I know it's a little off topic, but reality checks I implore expectation when I'm trying to perform a reality check. So I don't just mindlessly pinch my nose. I don't just mindlessly check my hands. I actually imagine, what would it look like if I had 6 fingers? What would that look like right now? What would it be like if I could breathe even though my nose is pinched? And then I expect it. I imagine it. I visualize. And if I try really hard and it still doesn't give, if nothing changes, then there's a strong chance that I'm not dreaming. And that's a skill I've built up over time. I know it's mixing a few concepts that are associated with lucid dreaming, but I believe that a properly performed reality check also exercises your control. And if you're, using expectation and with full confidence, and you can't control the physics of the world you're in, then it's quite likely that you're not dreaming. But don't assume, double check, really try, imagine. And if you flex that muscle over time, you'll find that within the dream realm, it does have an effect, a positive impact. I'm sure people disagree with that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Great. So first of all, I'd just like to quickly say that we're gonna, because of the sudden amount of people, which by the way is great, we're going to again make use of the hand raising system. So just quickly, it's gonna be in the chat of the StreamYard like last time. Just say hand and I'll go through you like in the order in which you raise your hand. Try to keep things on topic. There we go. And this is only now happening. So who have we next? Red, you can go on ahead.
All right. Well, I think, we gotta talk about this with dream control, which is what you said of expectations for it. And did he leave? Well, I guess not all
We're just in
left.
connection problem.
All right.
You can go on it.
Yeah, he mentioned expectations, and he's back. Welcome. So yeah, with expectations with dream control, I totally understand how it's a main thing that people talk about, but I guess kind of like how people talk about schemas, I'd consider they're a separate type of subconscious expectation that I like to bring up, which is when people say, I tried to fly but I failed. Why? I expected to fly, I expected it to work. They're angry that it didn't work. So that means despite their expectations, it went against their expectations. But at the same time, there's the subconscious expectations, which, kind of relates to schemas, which is, I forgot the word for it, but, how everything connects together. That can show you another expectation that's even deeper. You expect in a dream, I can fly. But at the same time, you're feeling gravity in that dream. So that leads to the expectation of not being able to fly. You feel yourself in the human body, you feel yourself with gravity. So even though you believe you can fly in a dream, everything else that your body is sensing is telling you that you can't. So even though you have the expectation, it fails because of the more subconscious expectation.
That's great, thanks. You can go ahead, Curious.
So just given this entire idea of limiting beliefs that Amina decided to bring up, that actually, especially when you relate it a little bit to some of the stuff that I've been doing in motivation, there's a very good parallel between the expectations that you have within a lucid dream and the ones that you have out of it. And if you believe that you can do something inside a lucid dream, you should be able to. Now, I have seen so many of those preconceived notions or misconceptions online, or at least pre-frames for those limiting beliefs on certain YouTube channels, right? And whenever they say something that you cannot look into a mirror, or you cannot do this, or you cannot do that, those types of pre-frames are the things that start to stray you away from the idea of doing that in a lucid dream. And once that's rooted, right, it doesn't have to be conscious. Even if you think you believe it at the beginning, it could also be very unconscious. Even when doing some of those belief destructions in real life for our own limiting beliefs as it's related to goals, we call that scratching the record. And it's not a record that might be playing at the moment. It's just one of those in the background that is unconscious. And as it comes to the idea of flying, I would imply that our expectations are already rooted in reality. We cannot necessarily do that, or we don't expect to do it in real life. So if the dream is a simulation of that, and you don't really believe it yet at the unconscious level, maybe you might not be able to do it, or you might not have success at the first shot. So we really need to find a way to scratch that record and then continue by re-engaging your unconscious mind, moving those conscious goals to your unconscious resources. And once you've got that, you should be able to continue and follow through with that goal, like flying.
Cool, thanks. DJ, go on ahead.
So the way I would look at how to do dream control is breaking it down in two categories. One is intuitive control, and one is like kind of building it up from the ground up. So if you can't do anything, I can't fly, I try to fly, I can't do it. That's the point where you have to start working on the base level. Like, for example, when I first learned how to fly, I didn't start with flying, I started with jumping. But I couldn't get that going. So I bring in stuff from waking life. So stuff that I already had a really strong history with. You could say it's a schema, whatever. Something I used was like sticking my head out of a window in a car. So like you're moving really fast and the wind is going by really quickly, and I use that to simulate the feeling of speed as I'm flying. So then that actually in turn allowed me to go faster visually as well. So you can see how it kind of if you can't do something intuitively, you can kind of start to construct it piece by piece, and then the different kind of schemas that you have will start to intermingle and support one another. So that's how I would say, how do you do it? You know, some things just come easily to people. Some things are really hard. People have an idea that if you get lucid, you can do anything, but you have to remember that lucid dreaming might be a novel experience, or you may not have done something in a lucid dream before, and you need to train yourself how to experience it. And then you can start to build off of those experiences and create new and interesting original experiences from all of the different aspects that you've worked with. You know, in the dream, you don't have gravity, but you can bring in your experiences of gravity. And you think about all the different aspects of the waking world, the dimensions, the sight, the sounds, sensory perceptions. You can bring all that in, and then you can even explore further than that with dream control. And another basis of dream control, I think, is grounding within the dream. Really, like you could call it presence. Being there in the moment, I think, is huge. And just going for a goal, going for something that you want to control, might be counterproductive depending on how effective you are. Like um, maybe you're just wanting to go with the goal and get it, and that can work. But a lot of times, really familiarizing yourself with the nature of the dream in a way and like interacting with it is a great way to kind of build a foundation for yourself.
Cool, thanks. Nightel, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in about, I think Curious brought it up, flying as an exercise in dream control, which really resonates with me personally because when I first got into lucid dreaming and I was somewhat successful, I would say, at least on a weekly basis, I was attaining lucidity. And I was really hooked on learning how to fly. And the reason being is because I had done it once somewhat spontaneously and then maybe taken it for granted. So a few consecutive dreams, I struggled with it actually. I guess that unconscious schema that gravity exists even in the dream followed me to sleep. And so I also have a fear of heights. So for me, it was more than just defying gravity, it was about conquering that fear also. And I was drawn to it. I thought, what a better place to embody confronting that fear. And so flying, I was met with these feelings of mortality and just, the impact of gravity. And what happens if I hit this building if I don't turn quick enough? And it took a lot of conscious effort to really um, stay grounded, ironically enough, to stay grounded in the present moment and to feel what I perceive to be the sensation of flying. And it took months maybe to master it until I realized that, flying was just another hedonistic flight of fancy for me. It was just, something superficial that I found cool and entertaining. And after I conquered my fear, it felt like, what's next? But the lessons I took from that stayed with me for some time. And what I've learned personally about dream control, if you're new to lucid dreaming, this is a nice practical tip I encourage you to explore. Um, Find out a way to exercise control in the dream that coincides with your existing beliefs in waking life. And let me explain. So, when people say flying in the dream, there's all types of different flight patterns. You could Superman and stick your arms out and fly like a superhero, or it could be more like Hancock, where you're kind of like drunkenly, you know, being pulled by a cord on your back, or a really popular method to practice flying is to pretend you're swimming through the air. And now you're translating the medium of air into water and equating it to an experience most of us have had already, which is moving with a feeling of weightlessness through a different medium. And I wanted to see if anybody else had anything to chime in on that, because I think it goes, much further beyond flying itself. You can use those same tools to rationalize with your dreaming mind that I might not be able to fly, but I know I can swim. So let me just, try that instead. And if that doesn't work, maybe even make it more rational. Even though you don't need these tools, they might help you, uh, conceive of how it's possible. And so another thing I've tried is using a jetpack, because that's a piece of equipment that exists in the real world that I could manifest within the dream and help me fly. So I'm wondering if any of you have experience with using tools like that to help exercise dream control.
Nice. Thanks. DJ, you can go ahead first.
Yeah, so just to answer Night Owl's question, definitely use intermediaries a lot. So that's what I call them. And so a lot of going around corners, a lot of pulling things from my outside my line of sight into my line of sight. And every time I'm doing this, I'm holding whatever it is in my mind. Maybe not visually, but I've got this idea in my head. And sometimes it even has this way of becoming solid, where if I'm holding it in my mind and I know that it's not quite ready, and then I get the impression, oh, it's solid and it's ready. So it's really difficult to break that down. But also, I've had dream characters teach me methods of dream control. I had dream character give me a great trick with a door, where like I always, when I think about doors, I'd be looking for a door, but the dream character just created one out of the floor. It just like pulled one out of the floor. It's like it didn't need a door jam. It didn't need anything. And then, we open the door and it leads to somewhere else and just creates this portal, right? So I guess that might be an example of like kind of breaking a schema in a way. And it's difficult to do. All this stuff is difficult to do because in the lucid dream, there's an underlying assumption that you don't have a lot of time, and that is probably one of the biggest hurdles I've had. Is a very like deep assumption that I don't have the time, and to get over that, I had to take an attitude of playing with the dream, and it's more like a dance rather than I'm manipulating everything. It's more of like, okay, what's here and how can I play with it versus what's here and how can I control it. In that way, Charlie Morley has a thing of like asking the dream for things. That's another way of doing that. But yeah, so the thought that I had there was like playing is really important, and finding that moment in the dream. Like sometimes I might not even, maybe I'll visualize something, but it's almost like an accumulation of energy. You might call it expectation or willpower or whatever, but it's like kind of building this energy, and then I seem to be able to do something a lot easier. So sometimes that's visualizing something. Sometimes, sometimes using an intermediary. Um, yeah, I mean, and the possibilities are endless. So getting creative and playing is really important.
Nice, thanks. Red, you can go ahead.
All right. Well, yeah, y'all brought a bunch of good stuff up, and yeah, like thinking about what Night Owl said about how he was flying to kind of get over his fear. Like, I do feel like maybe doing that of like confronting fears, or like you said, of confronting those type of expectations, like that probably helps solidify control a lot. Because I remember, like, my first thing was flight, and that was just because I heard about it, so I wanted to try it out. But the next thing I did that pretty much like unlocked all control for me was yeah, I was a little kid, so in the middle of a nightmare, there was some monster, and I thought about it, how, I can do anything, and that's why I can fly. So I thought, well, why don't I do whatever I want to stop the monster? So I just turned it into a bunny, which is, completely harmless. And, that stopped the fear of that nightmare. And I realized, that was a crazy thing I did. I really can just do anything. So, yeah, like I do feel like, getting over fear, getting over something, that really helps with like advancing your control a lot. And again, about the thing of like using tools or whatever, like for a long time, I never used tools for control just because, yeah, I had that whole idea of I can just do anything. But after joining the community and hearing about stuff that people do, like I started adding more to control, which, made it less efficient, but just more fun. So, like instead of just completely teleporting instantly from one spot to another, I could have all kinds of effects of, reality bending, or, using some pretty portal or something. Like, there's fun ways to do it. So, it might be slower than being instantly sent over, but, it's fun to try out tools for control.
Great. That's a very nice perspective to hear.
I think overall, if we were to look at this idea or concept of using an intermediary, I'm going to adopt a vocabulary, DJ, because that's just, I've heard of intermediary in the context of conversation, but obviously when you move it to the idea of a lucid dream, it's really interesting. I was always going to call it something like some sort of conceptual or neural bridge, but it's so much to facilitate the idea that we're already grounded in our reality, and we come with all of those ideas of preconceived notions. As Red said, the first time that he went through all that process of dream control, he didn't come with any of those preconceived notions. So although that might begin as, if you have a goal, you might want to use that kind of tool or that intermediary to facilitate this idea that you should be able to do it, eventually maybe that might not become necessary. And the big question also comes to, like, to what degree of lucidity is that not necessary? Or do you not even need that in the first place? At what point would you be able to do anything that is possible such that you understand that the dream is simply a construction of the mind?
Great, thanks for that. Does anyone else have anything to add on this topic?
It gave me a thought.
Sure.
The lucids that I've been like the most lucid, I didn't really control very much. That was like, yeah, just kind of a thought. A lot of times when I'm controlling, I'm just messing around.
Nice.
How
Yeah.
much really is that based on your degree of you've begun lucid dreaming and you haven't received maybe, I'm not sure if it's an experience-based thing or once again, if maybe when you first jumped into lucid dreaming that you had some sort of preconceived notions, but do you think you might be able to attribute a reason to that? Like maybe it could be something to do with the degree of awareness. For example, one of the questions might be, does your degree of awareness influence the quantity of control that you have?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think actually the awareness in the dream for a lot of people can make control harder, because you're more aware of everything that's going on. This leads to an aspect of um, allowing the dream to do the thing rather than yourself consciously controlling every aspect of what's going on. So, most people that are controlling things on a regular basis, like every night, getting lucid all the time, are not using, extremely detailed step-by-step control. They have like a larger idea, and then they're allowing the dream to fill in the blanks, as it were. So if they're creating a solar system, they're not going through and deciding every single color of the planet or um, what the orbits are going to be and so on. It's like it's like control create. They have this, they want to create the solar system, and then their mind just does it. So I think being not too aware, but at higher levels of awareness, there's more of a balancing act that you have to play in order to control at a high level. And for me personally, my dreams tend to be a little bit more unstable in that I'll get scene changes, things will fall apart, things won't work, and it seems to be kind of just a thing that is like part of my dream life, and over time it's become more stable. But um, that's something where it's like control becomes less important, and just awareness becomes more important. Staying with the dream becomes more important. Being able to retain lucidity through scene transitions or the dissolution of a dream becomes more important. And in addition to, like, my practice is more focused on awareness over control. Like highly prioritize awareness over any narratives, any persistent realms, any dream control.
Nice. Thanks. Night Owl, you can go ahead unless you're gonna like move the topic a bunch, and if Red wants to stay on topic, but do you want to go ahead, Night
Yeah,
Owl?
actually, Red, if you wouldn't mind going first, DJ actually brought up something I would like to talk about it a little more in depth, and it's
All
based on a
right.
conversation I had with Sensei about present awareness and how that may actually be contradictory to lucidity or control. But I need to flesh out my thoughts a little bit more before I talk about that, especially because it's not really representing my own experience. So, Red, by all means, please, if you have something to add, you go first.
All right. Well, I'll give you some time. But yeah, like, yeah, bringing up that about having easier control with less awareness. Like, yeah, like, I have heard of that, and it does make sense because, yeah, like you said, you're like more there. So, like all those, yeah, subconscious expectations, whatever, like, so you are more it's easier for you to doubt that something will work if you're completely aware and completely there. And your senses are probably very vivid. Everything's telling you that your control shouldn't work. But with less awareness, it also makes sense, yeah, with the example of creating a solar system or something, that instead of you creating every single planet and everything and hoping, oh well, everything's so realistic, will this really work? well, if you're less aware, then you trying to create a solar system can just be making the dream itself just have a solar system appear in your vision. Like, it would even feel less direct. But, it's still appearing in your dream. You still accomplished the goal. So, yeah, eventually with control, you would be able to, add every planet yourself or purposely have the dream pretty much do it for you. But, and yeah, just like the whole example of asking someone for help or using a tool, just having the dream generated for you completely on its own. So yeah, it is possible to do like all kinds of controlful awareness, but I totally see using less awareness to your advantage.
Nice, thanks. Night Owl, do you feel ready to go ahead yet, or would you like some more time to
Nope,
think?
nope, not at all. And now Red just made it way worse for me because okay, let me just say, every time somebody says something, I'm like, it's five thoughts left field. And let me just say, based on what Red just said, we talked very briefly at the beginning. I'm not sure if you guys were here, so I wanted to mention again about the unconscious architect who helps co-create the dream. And I'm sure somebody can put it a lot more eloquently than that. But what we mean is you don't necessarily have to be in conscious control of all the details. It's almost as if your schema help set things on their own path and your subconscious fills in the details. And thankfully so. I believe it was Curious and I who had a conversation about luckily, we don't have to think about our digestive tract and how we're breathing and how often we have to blink and our body language, along with the words we're saying and what those words mean. At a certain point, attention blindness is a necessary survival skill that our subconscious mind helps organize for our conscious thoughts. And um, I think there is a balance between being hyper aware and almost forcing control, and what DJ was saying, and sort of taking a back seat and being a conscious observer. I know Amina has mentioned that on the Dream World podcast plenty of times, and I agree that some of the most meaningful dream work I've done personally was when I was lucid and allowing things to happen, because then it was like the perfect relationship between my unconscious and conscious mind. I was allowing the dream to create itself, and at the same time being aware of what was happening, so that perhaps my recall was, at its ultimate form because I was remembering as it was happening. And I would argue my lucid dreams are the ones I remember best. Um, but there were a few other things I definitely wanted to talk about. Um, I saw a great comment earlier. I know this is backtracking a little bit, but somebody said that they had a dream. Let me find it really quick. Dreaming I was flying is from a Facebook user. I'm sorry, I can't see your name. Um, Dreaming I was flying, I was more scared of landing than flying, but it was not a lucid dream. So thank you for that comment. I will say, if you have any comments as we talk, please drop them down below. And thank you for joining us. We will do our best to just continue our conversation so that we can maintain a stream of consciousness without, you know, interrupting ourselves for everything in the chat. But this was something I wanted to address. So we also mentioned earlier in the conversation how control may not be um, directly correlated to lucidity. And we posed the question, can you have control without consciousness? And it seems in this example that, this Facebook user who was dreaming they were flying without lucidity exerted some control, because otherwise, is that just a fantastical dream? They're clearly, breaking the laws of physics according to their regular schema. So is that maybe pre-lucidity because they're aware of, they're less aware of waking life limitations? I mean, now that we have a larger stage here with more guest speakers, feel free, anybody, to entertain this thought also. Um, does control mean lucidity or consciousness? Do you have to be conscious in order to have control? And we went back and forth on this a little bit.
Well, at the start of the session, we did.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you wait? Sorry. Did that sound good? Anyway, and then yeah, the start of the session we did try and define it, which was an interesting thing to get into. But anyway, you happened to also mention memory, and my mind automatically, of course, went to senseis and memory stuff, which we just dipped our toes into a bit in the last session, but is such an extensive topic. Anyway, dreaming is perception unconstrained by sensory input. DJ, you can go ahead.
Nice. That's a good one. So I wanted to respond to something Red said. So he was saying that, you know, kind of piggybacking off of what I was saying about, you know, sometimes if you're too aware, then the control can be more difficult and it can produce a sense of doubt, which is 100% true. And in my experience, it's not necessarily as much doubt as it is the awareness just not being, you know, skill issue kind of thing, where it's like whenever you slow down in the dream and just pause and be present, for, you know, for most people, I think it tends to be more difficult to remain lucid. And so when you slow down, when you're really at a high level of awareness, you're going to be more aware of your waking body. You're going to be more aware of your memories, and that stuff tends to mess with lucidity. But, you know, if you continue getting better, then you can get to the point where you're aware of your waking body, you're aware of your waking memories, all that stuff, and yet you can still decide, I'm going to be lucid and have fun with this or do whatever. And a lot of times that's more of like a choice to immerse yourself back into a flow, kind of a flow of the dream. And I think that's the part where being too aware can kind of create issues because you're kind of taking yourself out of this sort of flow and going along with the dream while you're lucid. You can experience a lot of really interesting things. And then when you actually break out of that flow and start controlling it yourself consciously, um, you might it might be difficult to sustain that awareness without the flow of your dream mind. Um, and then to address Night Owl's comment, um, is lucidity equal to control and so on? Does flying, because it's different than normal schema, mean that you're controlling? Um, Personally, I would just say no. I don't see that. There's got to be some kind of conscious intent. There's got to be some kind of, I don't even think like being in a non-lucid and using magic and having a dream about controlling. I don't think that's lucid control. Um, you can have a dream about being lucid, right? You can have a dream about just about anything, and your mind can make up all these different experiences. That doesn't mean you're lucid, doesn't mean you're conscious, doesn't mean you're in control. So I would take a little bit more of a stricter stance on that, because once you open that Pandora's box of, oh yeah, this is lucidity, then pretty much everything is going to be lucidity, and everybody's omni all of a sudden, which I would prefer to. I mean, that just creates so many issues and difficulties in terms of teaching people how to be lucid. I mean, if people want to do like the reality shifting thing where it's just you're incubating something and having fun and whatever, that's fine. Personally, I'm more interested in pushing the envelope and seeing how far I can take this awareness in the dream. How powerful can it become? What are the limit? Like, I want to go past the limitations. And getting inside narratives is a great way to limit yourself. So, I'm totally aware that it's kind of a unique perspective. It's probably a little bit more in line with like the dream yoga types, where it's like the lucid dream is actually a distraction. You're meant to go beyond that, and that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Cool, thanks.
Crystal, if it's okay, I'll just hop in really quickly,
Yeah, sure. I
because
was
DJ
just confused about
DJ
if you
brought up
were.
Sensei. Somebody brought up Sensei again, and I forgot. Your comment about being too aware really resonated with something Sensei has been trying to teach me recently, and that's that present awareness may in fact be counterintuitive to lucidity or control. I'm not sure, by all means, he may take a completely different stance than I am. But from my understanding, he used the example of soldiers being extremely present and aware of their surroundings and being trained to do so, to have a hypervigilance and almost constant state of adrenaline, which makes sense to me. However, there's been very little to show that that profession in particular, despite its regular awareness and mindful presence, is conducive to lucidity, right? If the two are synonymous, you would expect people who are present in their waking life to also experience lucidity in their dreaming life. And that's just not the case. And often it's quite the opposite, in the sense that soldiers may deal with symptoms of PTSD much more frequently, and therefore nightmares, where they lack a complete sense of control. And why is that? And the way it was described to me is in terms of chemicals, and how essentially cortisol or even adrenaline can impact how conscious you feel in the moment. And it's almost as if those things can act as triggers for a flight or fight response. That if you're really aware of where you're at and what you're doing, that it could actually hinder your ability to, like you said, DJ, go with the flow and walk that fine line of lucidity, meaning conscious awareness while letting other things happen without, demanding too much control. So I'd like to, sort of go down that rabbit hole, because I'm not sure I completely understand that. I wish Sensei was here to explain his perspective, but I'm sure he'll join us soon. The way I interpret it was, that awareness is good to an extent, but too much awareness can be counterintuitive, and I feel like that's sort of what you were saying, DJ. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Cool, thanks. Curious, you're next.
I wonder if we can expand this concept or this idea of awareness, because when you brought up the soldiers, it reminded me of something in particular that I sometimes even question myself. And that's if I'm having a conversation with someone and I'm aware of the surroundings, like, to what degree am I not being aware of the conversation itself? Like, it is good to be aware, yes, but I would imply that in order for awareness to be present, you'd have to be aware of something. So maybe when it comes to the idea of soldiers who are aware of everything around them, does that not distill maybe their connection with anything else that is happening in the moment? You can monitor only so many things at once. So if you have this idea of sensory overload, if you're aware of so many things, 2 million bits of information, right? We distort, we delete, we generalize. It's all of those filters that are trying to take that away. So if we try to end up distilling our awareness to everything that is around us, I can see how it could become detrimental to whether it's dream control or the idea of the present or becoming lucid. So I would want to ask, when it comes to this idea of conscious awareness, maybe the difference isn't the quantity of awareness that you have, but it is really what you were being aware of at that certain circumstance.
Nice, thank you. DJ, you can go on.
Okay. Yeah, I like that thought. So on that point Night Owl was making about the soldiers. That's you might call it a flow state. So like athletes have this, just about it. Every profession has some version of this, where you're kind of the the normal passage of time changes, and you start to kind of, people talk about getting kind of tunnel vision, or everything around them disappearing, and they get into this like high focus, high flow state. And actually, speaking of soldiers, I was watching a video of a guy who saved like hundreds of lives in I forget where it was, but he was like an off-duty spec ops guy, and he just ended up saving a bunch of people. And he said like he was on some kind of God level of, he just knew what to do. He was moving and acting like he'd never had before in his life, and just a total flow state. And so I wanted to say, like, there's two different aspects of awareness. Like, if you look at research and stuff, that it breaks down into attentional awareness and a kind of larger, broader sort of awareness. So one is the thing that you're looking at right now. I'm talking, I'm using my vocal cords, and a lot of that is unconscious, but I'm directing my attention to my thoughts and what I'm talking about right now. And then there's a whole other host of processes or things going on that represents a larger awareness of, that I can tap into with my attentional awareness, but typically it's not something that we, as we say, pay attention to at all times. So you can think of it as you're paying attention to something. And there's a meditation book called The Mind Illuminated, and it's by a guy named John Yates, and he goes into a little bit of research on this kind of thing. And the thing is like, in any aspect of life, you have to be able to let go of the attentional awareness, and just let things be, and just do it, or go with the flow, or all these cliches that we have to represent this idea of letting go of control, letting go of this attentional awareness. Because when we were babies, we, for the most part, almost all of us learned how to walk. Um, and at the time, it took a lot of effort. We probably don't remember it. And now we just do it effortlessly, without even thinking about it. It's not even, walking especially is something, it's just our muscles just move. It just happens. And, and you can actually go into the science of this in body schema, which is really interesting stuff, because we all have a body schema. We all have proprioception, some interesting lucid dreaming techniques that you could play with proprioception. But SSILD is sort of in that realm. But it's this thing, we all experience it. We all know what it's like, but these words that we're putting to it is something that is unfamiliar to us. And so I would think about it in those terms, where the flow state is something where you're just trusting yourself. You're having, you have faith in your abilities, and you're not even like, there's certain aspects where thinking is going to get you in big trouble, because if you start thinking, then it's going to slow you down, and it's going to get in the way of that automatic process. And at that point, it's just time to let go, and let Jesus take the wheel. You just gotta just let go, and allow things to happen. So, like, for example, to bring us back to lucid dreaming, um, if I want a certain kind of dream, I'm not going to visualize a specific thing. I'm going to say, I want this kind of dream, and then it happens. So, and that's taken me a long time to develop, but it's a thing where I've learned to trust my intentions, and I kind of know how to get the ball rolling, as it were. And once the ball is rolling, you just let it go. Um, and it takes a lot of practice to get into that, but um, yeah, hopefully that was contributive.
Nice, thanks. DJ, have you seen the thing that Mars posted in the Discord? And do you have anything to add to that or mention in that context?
Let me read it real quick.
Because I don't really know how to interpret all of the acronyms, to be honest.
Yeah, so I haven't read all of Conscious Mind, Sleeping Brain, I know what book she's talking about, but I don't actually know what CTRT is.
All right. Well, I'll just say out loud that the message was, remember that the CT/RT flow idea from the conscious mind, sleeping brain was the question. And then later corrected to OT.
Oh.
Yeah,
I mean,
this seems to tie into the acronym discussions that we've been having recently about whether or not they're cutting people off. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, Conscious Mind, Sleeping Brain is a great compilation book of quite a few authors. It was compiled in the 90s. It includes Stephen LaBerge. It includes Alan Worsley. I think it has Paul Foley. It's got a lot. It's a great book, and I think it's available like as an ebook form as well. Definitely worth a read.
Great, yeah, definitely. Does anyone else have anything to add on the topic? I know we just sort of sent it slightly off topic with the discussion about what they were saying. So anyway, I found it interesting how we've mostly been talking about just in general people's experiences, but what do people tend to say? What do we think about how to present this to someone who is asking about dream control? How do we put it into that perspective? Because we probably won't send them a 1-hour discussion on it, but how do we explain it to someone? Nightal, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of paraphrase something we said earlier. I think that dream control, in my opinion at least, has to have a conscious element. Although you may be able to defy waking life schema, that's still to some extent an unconscious dream. And dream control itself is exerting your will as a matter of expectation and maybe to take a slightly more metaphysical route, manifestation. And I'll leave it at that.
All right, thanks for that. I'd like to just present the also potential words that I see being thrown around to sort of put this into that perspective as well. I see a lot of words such as perspective, perception, schema also gets thrown around, especially expectation, and association tend to be, off the top of my head, tend to be the things thrown around. And now I'd like to just say, just out of, a comment, in the past, even just the past year of the lucid dreaming community, at least on Discord, which I'm most involved in, things tend to change very fast. So at the start of the year of last year, usually what was said is, you need to make use of a schema in order to use dream control. And this has since usually sort of been discarded, seeing as schemata tend to be considered something which don't need to be changed nor influenced for control. So then we sort of moved on more to perspective, association, and perception, which got thrown around a lot. And then recently people have been sort of starting to discuss schema again and being like, wait, what are we supposed to be saying? But I feel like one of the most common things to do at this point, at this stage, tends to be simply saying, what do you think will best work? And then they form this association themselves with whatever they think is best for them. And then you don't even need to go into using any long words. You can just be like, well, someone could respond to something with, okay, I imagine if I want to get superpowers to be able to fly, I imagine becoming Superman, to give that absolutely cliche example. And then you can tell them, okay, well, try that. And then chances are that it might work, because the thing is that that's what tends to work inside of the dreamer's mind. It's better for them to create their own sort of answers to their own problems, tend to be the thing. And so I just wanted to add that to the discussion. I know that basically sends us up a level in terms of the deepness of how we're going. But does anyone have something to add to this? Because it tends to be a big point of discussion too. Night Owl, was that supposed to be a hand raise? Or was that not?
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
it showed up.
So thank you so much, Crystal, for saying that. I know it might seem like a deeper concept, but honestly, it's the most superficial one, and all of the most advanced lucid dreamers agree. Find what works for you. Don't let me, Crystal, Red Dreams, Amina, or Curious tell you how to control your dreams. You already know how. You know what works for you. You just have to explore, experiment, and have that experience for yourself. Um, I will say that I advocate for a lucid living lifestyle where you're not just using your dreams as a means of escape to this fantasy realm that has nothing to do with real life implications. Life is the ultimate dream, and you do have some control over your own life, believe it or not, regardless of the circumstances or the schema that already exist in your own mind. Start with controlling your waking life and practice, right? If what what lights me up, what excites me and makes me feel alive, what do I want to do to have fun today? That's such a simple question, right? And the simplest questions have the most complicated answers. Hold on, my toddler is figuring out how to unfold a chair. Sorry, but let me say this: control starts while you're awake, and the expectations you have about your ability to control your waking life will follow you into the dream. So start today by, or tonight, tomorrow, with doing something that excites you, maybe something that scares you a little bit, but always be safe. And realize now that control is a perspective, and it's made through associations you have based on the schema that's developed both consciously and unconsciously to try and use as many terms as Crystal brought up as possible. Um, but what does control look like in waking life, right? If you're not in control of your life, then I would argue that you are allowing your unconscious to run the show, that you're sleepwalking through life on autopilot. And allowing your routines and the patterns you've set forth prior to determine your future. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. While I mentioned, you know, yeah, tell them. While I mentioned earlier that Curious and I went back and forth on, the reticular activating system and how much you really do need to be aware of in order to be effective in life. I think that control is one of those things where many people aren't aware of how much they can actually control. They don't realize that the systems that you establish while awake uh, dictate the narrative of your dreams while you're asleep. So start today. Create a better sleeping environment. Create better associations with your dreams. Make them feel important. Make them feel exciting and fun. And all those things will carry over into your sleep. And I'd love to hear if anybody has any thoughts about, not just dream control, but life control, but maybe just control as a concept itself.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's great. Does anyone else have anything to add? And I do feel bad for sort of bringing the topic a bit more to the surface, but do people want to go deeper on this again, or have another perspective on how to present it to more general audiences?
I have thoughts. I just don't want to get in front of anybody else if they have thoughts as well. But I can
No,
go.
you can go ahead.
Okay, so in terms of teaching people how to have dream control, it's difficult because if somebody doesn't have experience being lucid, it can be tricky explaining how it works. And then in addition to that, most people have trouble extending their lucids. Also, I've just anecdotally, and then also through a survey study that I found that was done in Iran, uh, it appears that people with a more goal orientation tend to have more frequent lucids, but shorter lucids. And so I know that the online dreaming community, lucid dreaming community, is extremely goal oriented. especially when it comes to, you use this technique, you do this, and you do that every day until it's almost like a workout routine. And it's a very kind of mechanical approach, which I think is good for a lot of people, but I've also met enough people in the larger dreaming community, people that don't want to lucid dream. They'd rather just have, but they're very interested in dreams. Um, you find that I've found this a lot in like Jungian dream circles where they want to derive meaning from their unconscious through dreams and feel that lucidity would actually interrupt that. And these people I find will have extremely lengthy, vivid dreams. And some of them, when they become lucid, have extremely high levels of control and vividness. But their lucidity is occasional, maybe once every few months or so. And I can't get, it does give me the impression that there's a trade-off there where in order to build that level of vividness, control, and length of lucidity, it takes a long time. And I think the approach of control can be really counterproductive to that. But people don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that, like, oh, you should just value your dreams and, you know, build a relationship with your dreams rather than, plug in the variables, plug in the reps, and then you'll get gains, which is typically how a lot of people online, just tell me what to do so I can get lucid and then I can control my dreams. So that assumption is, I would say, predominant. I would say that's what most people come to lucid dreaming with, the assumption that if once I become lucid, I get good at it, I can control everything. So a lot of times you may actually be fighting against that expectation before you can even teach somebody how to lucid dream in the first place, or how to dream control in the first place. But what I would do if I was teaching somebody to do dream control is start very small and work your way up. And um, so if you want to create a dream scene, for example, and you're having trouble creating a dream scene, don't try to create the entire scene at once. Try to create a tiny object. So, for example, I'll create a chair, and then a church that's half church, half grocery store appears around the chair. Or I create a towel, and a room that's actually part of the Skyrim universe is created around the towel. And then I'm in the Skyrim universe that turns into half Harry Potter, and then there's a nuclear missile flying through the sky. Like, so the point is, like, start small and let your mind do most of the work. If you can't fly, try jumping. If jumping isn't working, bring something else in, like the feeling of movement. Get creative, like whatever you're trying to do, start small. So with like guns, for example, guns weren't working for me, and recently I started working on that a little bit. And so instead of just expecting it to work and imagining how guns work, I broke it down like, okay, do I feel myself pulling the trigger? Can I feel the gun in my hand? Okay, can I point the gun towards, and I'm doing this over the course of several dreams, okay, not just in one. And then it's like, okay, the bullet comes out, but it falls out like it's a piece of sludge or something. Okay, so I'm going to focus on the bullet hitting the target. Okay, well, at first the bullet hits the target and kills the person, but it doesn't really like fly on its own. I had to control it. So going through like step by step, constructing a schema, building upon it. Don't get discouraged just because you didn't get the exact thing. Once you build it, you've got it. And maybe you might have to come back to work on it some more, who knows. But this is not something that's just magically going to appear immediately. This is something that you have to build on piece by piece. So, and each question that a person might have when they're first starting out with dream control is going to be, the answer is going to be different. I think the most common one is like, how do I make my dreams last longer. And that's really a matter of controlling yourself rather than the dream. Calming down, grounding in the dream, letting the dream do its thing, and so on. And maybe a lot of this is controlling yourself, right? And that ties into waking life in that way. But for me personally, I do pretty much all my dream control work in dream, in lucids, and I have a really hard time bringing in stuff like detailed stuff from waking life. I can bring in really broad concepts. Like I'll be like, hey, I want to have a really epic lucid dream, and that night I'll have like a crazy dream. But if I want something really detailed, that's going to be really tough. I have to do that within the dream. So anyway, if new person, I would say start small.
That is great. Thanks so much. Does anyone have something to add to this? I'm going to assume not. Well, you missed your chance. So seeing as no one has something to add to this, I'll move on just a bit. So it's, as for what you were saying a bit earlier, TJ, more to do with sort of the idea of what were you saying exactly, like high-level lucids and similar? I wanted to quote your controversial opinion that you sent a little while before as well, because that sort of ties in, right? So you said those who claim omni are experiencing almost all their lucids as veiled low level, and most beginners are experiencing off-rails high-level lucids.
Let's
And then
piss everybody off. Let's do it.
So what do we think about this? So I'm interested in, especially with the application of control to this, because, railing has things to do with control. Sort of the concept is, well, the idea is somewhat similar. And so where should we go with this, and how could we apply it to the discussion we've just been having?
So I would say, generally speaking, I don't like judging people's experiences because it can undermine their future experiences. So if I say, and this is what I emphasize for beginners, especially, I emphasize valuing every single bit of awareness that you get and building upon it and looking at every single aspect. Like if you're questioning anything, if anything is weird, seeing that as an aspect of awareness, increased awareness, and of something to build on towards lucidity. So I'm very much into valuing every snippet of awareness that you can possibly grab a hold of and build on that. But when it comes to people that say, I'm lucid in every dream, just knowing that it's a dream doesn't mean that you are controlling everything. It doesn't mean that I think a lot of new people seem to think that lucidity equals total control, and you know, and that's just not true. First of all, but also, I personally really like the Paul Foley approach, and his approach, I believe, is like a Clotrum or something like that. Anyway, it's like his criteria for lucidity. And basically, he has an extremely high standard, at least in contrast to the online lucid dreaming community, that, you would need waking life memories. You basically need your waking life awareness in your lucid dream. And I don't know of anybody really that uses that standard. Now, personally, I like it because I think it gives me something to strive toward. I think of it as a sort of perfect lucid is one in which I have all of that intact. And then I also have like a flow state. I have the ability to enter a narrative if I like. I should also say that, and this is a point that Sensei / Brandon likes to make, is that naturals, people who've learned naturally or intuitively on their own, tend to have um, more like higher standards, or tend to be kind of what I'm doing, which is a little bit of gatekeeping. And I did learn on my own, and when I was like what do you say? I was like 6 years old, and I lucid dreamed pretty consistently for a couple of years. From I don't know, it's hard to say exactly the time period, but maybe like from the time I was like 8 to 10. I took a long time to learn, and then I had a breakthrough, and I got to the point where I could basically just decide what I wanted to do. Do I want to have a nice long non-lucid? Do I want to have a high focus lucid? And you know, when people think about are you lucid or not, some of the more like high standards folks might say, well, you need to be able to consciously like control your eyes so that you can do the whole Stephen LaBerge thing where it's like proving that you're in a lucid dream. And so there's some skeptics that are saying, well, if you're omni, then you should be able to use these eye movements in every single dream. But that is a very high standard for saying somebody is lucid, right? So it's somebody who is having maybe lower level lucids every night in every dream is not going to be able to do those eye movements. They're not going to be able to prove that they have lucids in every dream. But overall, I just want to emphasize like the people that are saying I'm lucid in all my dreams, they're not doing these like high level crazy lucid dream control stuff. um, a lot of times they're doing very similar things in all their dreams. They might even be in a persistent realm every time. They might be in a narrative every time. It might be very familiar to them. So like it's not something where I'm like these people are not getting lucid. They are, but I don't think it's what people expect, because once you've really developed a lucid dreaming practice after a while, you have a lot of flexibility. You can take it from 0 to 100 in a second and then back down again. So what I would describe as like dynamic lucidity, where if I needed it, I could have it. But a lot of times dreams are more interesting and enjoyable when you're just letting them, you and if you have a high enough level of ability in lucid dreaming, you can just say, okay, the dream is going to do this, and then it plays out like that, and you experience it and maybe you don't control all of it, and you could let it do its thing. And I see this especially with persistent realm people, where certain characters will have their own personality and a sense of free will in a way, and so they'll kind of change the dream based on that character's whatever that character may be, right? um so yeah, like I could, definitely like could be controversial. I don't think anybody is having high level Paul Foley standard lucid dreams in all their dreams. I don't think that's possible. And I think, you know, I know of a few omnis that agree with me. I've tried this myself when I was a kid learning that, and it's exhausting for me. Like doing that, trying to make that happen, that high level is, for me, it's exhausting. Maybe there's a superhuman out there that can make it happen. Um, but I would say, there are omnis out there, but they're not having Paul Foley lucid dreams. That's so, you know, I just say that to kind of temper people's expectations. Um, so when they start hating on omnis, they understand what they're talking about.
Cool, thanks. That's great, all of it. Does someone Night Owl, you raised your hand for this one, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to second what DJ said. I've talked to a few omnis. I'm not one myself, and from what I've heard, a lot of omnis actually want to figure out how to stop lucid dreaming because it can be so exhausting. So I think, like most things in life, the middle path is the way. and to try to seek balance. And that's some modicum of conscious effort and control, along with letting the flow state happen. And I'll just share a really brief anecdote about how I got into lucid dreaming. And it started with a lucid nightmare. So it was actually a lucid nightmare with sleep paralysis. But the first time I actually sought lucidity on my own, um, I'm very embarrassed to tell this story, but it's already out there somewhere, so I might as well share it with you all here also. I remember going to bed this evening, and I scrolled Imager before I fell asleep, like I did most nights. And for whatever reason, Nicolas Cage was all the rage back then, and he was on several memes. And for again, whatever reason, he just happened to make his way into my dream, which was very normal, everyday stuff, guys. It was like I was walking down the aisle of the grocery store that I worked at, greeting customers as I normally do. And uh, next thing I know, Nicolas Cage was crouched down looking at a can of soup on a shelf. And I said, "Hey, how's it going?" And he stood up, turned around, and gave me that creepy Nicolas Cage smile only he can do. And I thought to myself, wow, Nicolas Cage, you're really here. What are you doing in, this small town at my little grocery store? Doesn't somebody shop for you? I was absolutely starstruck. And I guess I love National Treasure that much. I really don't know. But the truth is, immediately I became lucid. M- Much like many other NPCs I've interacted with, immediately upon acknowledging the nature of the dream, he he looked at me and just smiled. He didn't say a word. Literally, I knew immediately, unconsciously, that this was a dream. It didn't make sense, and I became lucid. And the first thing I did was walk down the aisle, and I turned to my coworker and I thought, if I'm really dreaming, I know, I don't expect, I don't anticipate, I don't think, I know I can look at them and imagine what it would be like if they metamorphized into a cat. And I actually visualized it within the dream, and it happened. And I was amazed. I was ready to take on the world. My next goal was to break out of those doors of the grocery store and take off in flight, but that didn't happen. I was met at the entrance of the grocery store by none other than another pop culture icon. As funny as it sounds, Heath Ledger's version of the Joker stopped me at the entrance. And in full Joker uniform, was literally straight out of the movie. And he stood there menacingly in the doorway, and I greeted him with, "Oh, this is a dream. You're in my dream." And he looked back at me and said, "Do you think that matters here?" And I just, oh my gosh, I had goosebumps right up my spine. I felt mortal fear that what I was doing was not just happening within the confines of my own mind, but perhaps there was a real element of danger. It introduced doubt, and I was actually scared. And as he as those words left his lips, he pulled out a blade from inside of his trench coat, and he wielded it kind of like he kind of cocked it down at his side. It wasn't really like up here, it was like down casually, just showing me the blade, almost tempting me to walk by. And I responded with, I know that what I seek is on the other side of those doors, and that this is a test, it's a challenge, right? And almost a reality check. Like, are you dreaming? Are you awake? Are you sure you want to go through with this? And the only thing I could rationalize at that time was like the Green Lantern. I materialized a ball and chain. I literally strapped him to the floor with all my will. I thought about what it would look like if I could manifest shackles to bolt him to the ground. Because again, it was a intermediary tool that I could visualize that helped me rationalize I'm going to stop the Joker. And sure enough, I was able to do it. And I still wasn't able to actually, control him, let's say, as a dream character. I wasn't in full control of the entire dream. He was, for all intents and purposes, an entity. But I was able to manipulate the dream in terms of chaining him to the floor, and I proceeded to just squeeze by as small as I could, just between the gap of him waving this blade at me menacingly, trying to cut me in any way he could, and just this small distance between the wall and where he could reach. And when I made it out those doors, all suspension of disbelief was out the window. I mean, I knew then that my only limitation was what I could imagine within my own mind, and I flew. I flew so far, so high, so fearlessly that I don't even remember the dream ending. I just remember waking up and feeling empowered and determined to get back. And like most people, it did take me quite some time to return to a lucid dream. And surprisingly, the next time I didn't have as much control. Maybe I took it for granted. Um, but just to play off of what DJ said, control is not uh, equal to lucidity. Just because you're aware of what's happening doesn't mean you can control what's happening. And at the same time, I encourage you to start building that skill through muscle memory and practicing, the little things that you can control. Don't try to do too much at once, like I did. I was quickly humbled and, quite frankly, mortally scared to death. But what I recommend you doing is think about what makes sense to you and make that your reality, in waking life and the dreams. And yeah, I hope that our conversation tonight helped all of you listening, whoever you are, wherever you're at, um, with hearing different perspectives about what works for us. Because by no means is it universal, right? It depends on your own beliefs. So explore based on our experiences and find out what works for you. That's my advice.
Nice. That was great to hear. Thanks for sharing. Does anyone have anything to add onto this? Maybe your own experiences or comments on the topics that he was touching on? If not,
my hand's been up.
oh, I did not realize I skipped that. Well, is it related to what he said, or is it
No, it's related to like the whole question and also a little bit of what he said.
Oh, right. Yeah, sure, you can go ahead. It was if someone had something to respond directly to what he said, but right, cool. You can go ahead.
All right, because I gotta say, you sounded like you were embarrassed right before telling the story, but that was really fun to hear about. But yeah, like I really
I
liked hearing
appreciate
about
that.
that.
Thank you. It's somewhat embarrassing because it's like, really, Nicolas Cage of all people, and then it's like, I don't
I mean, it
know.
really sounds like dream stuff.
Yeah, it is. It was ridiculous, honestly, even while it was happening. But I think it's worth mentioning that movies and media really do have an impact on your subconscious mind. And it's like when I was watching The Dark Knight and, witnessing this beautiful performance by Heath Ledger, rest in peace, it
Yeah.
really did leave an impression on me. It was like that this is just a regular guy who like went crazy and has, some reason to feel the way he does, but takes it out in all the wrong ways. And it was the last thing I expected to happen. And it just brought me back down to reality. Like, you are not in complete control.
Yeah.
And there are certain things that you're afraid of that maybe you can confront, but will challenge you. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, just like in the movies, he's just a man, but he can scare anyone. But yeah, that was
Cool.
really fun to hear about. But yeah, I
Thanks, bud.
wanted to also answer the whole thing DJ brought up of people that claim Omni having lower level lucids and beginners having higher level lucids. Because I think like in my experience, like I do have high level lucids, but like I don't know enough Omnis to really know like what the average is there. But like I have seen like other people that claim they were Omni that just come and go. And yeah, I've honestly been a bit disappointed, like because like it's cool hearing about like whatever they go through, like them learning control or whatever type of persistent world they might have, but so many of them like set up rules for themselves. They're like, oh, I can't do this, this is too hard, someone tries to stop me, or like they just create so many limits for themselves. So like I totally understand seeing as most omnis having low level lucids, And also, yeah, like I didn't know, but like even though like I'm not so sure about this statement, like the whole experience that you described, DJ, that you've had of like I guess like choosing how much lucidity like and all the other stuff, like it reminds me of how it was before servers, where yeah, like I mostly enjoyed stories, and yeah, like I would barely, and I mean I guess I kind of still barely lose control or whatever, because yeah, like I just want to enjoy the stories. But yeah, like after joining the community, and I, and yeah, and I did present myself as an omni. Like I wanted to make sure, am I really lucid in all dreams? Like because yeah, people were like, maybe it's fake lucids, maybe whatever. So like, yeah, like I made sure that they were high level lucids, and saying that I'm in a dream and all that, just to confirm to myself that no, it's not some fake lucid. It's not some type of weird way like of dreams somehow involving the dreams, like the topic of dreams. But yeah, like, and I also think like with the beginners having high level lucids, I feel like yeah, of course there are some beginners that get high level lucids, and that's the ones that get really excited. But also there are a ton that just don't get lucids, or they get a lucid where they're like, I tried this control, but I woke up immediately. I tried this control, but it didn't work. I tried this, I got lucid and immediately woke up or instantly forgot. So like, I guess based on the omnis I've seen, I guess there's some that would have like low level or like some crazy restricted control. And yeah, like most beginners, I would think it's like low level. But yeah, whenever we hear about the high level stuff from either omnis or beginners, it's always fun to hear about it. So that type of stuff sticks in our minds a lot more. So I guess I say I kind of disagree. Yeah, like, I guess I do disagree, but I totally see like where you're coming from.
Nice, thanks. I'd like to add that this sort of ties into the topic which we were mentioning recently, not on call, but before, of sort of the effect of the community, of the lucid dreaming community on people's experiences, dreaming experiences, lucid dreaming experiences, due to the things that are talked about and shared, versus the sort of more natural experience that you might get if you were detached from the community and still having your own lucid dreaming or dreaming experiences. To give an example, it's like, for example, oh, I can't control my dreams. Could be something that someone is saying publicly in chat, and then you read it, and how should that affect you in a way where you might actually struggle with control simply because you're witnessing so many other people struggle with it, that it almost becomes an expectation to struggle with it too, because that's all you're seeing. I mean, half the time, especially in communities, you get more stories of, I tried this and I failed, how I need help, rather than I tried this and I succeeded. You can too, right? So I thought that could be nice to touch on. Anyway, does anyone have anything to add? We also might have a few questions to go through, but does anyone have anything to add on this topic and the story? I'll give you like, okay, time's up. DJ, have you any questions that you see could be read out?
Yeah. So Henry Harrison asked, do you normally need to use a tool or something similar to convince yourself of the possibility of a result in lucid dreaming?
All right, who would like to respond to that one? If no one's going to respond to it, that would be quite disappointing. Someone needs to respond to this one. I'm going to be blunt.
So Amina responded, basically, no, I think most guests would agree that it's a skill and those intermediary tools act as training wheels. So I would say you don't need to use a tool, but for me personally, I have kind of a toolkit, I guess you could say, things that I've used and continue to use. I don't think it's something where the ultimate goal doesn't have to be you're just snapping your fingers and something's happening. You can use the same methods of control indefinitely if that's what works. I don't see any issue with that.
Cool. Would you mind repeating the question? Maybe writing it in chat or something so that we can all reference it afterwards.
Sure. Let's see.
I think it's a better idea to have things up and in the chat. I think there's a way to do that on the StreamYard thing, but I don't even know who has control here. Anyway, the question again: do you normally need to use a tool or something similar to convince yourself of the possibility of a result in lucid dreaming? And Ved did indeed mention that he would like to go first if the question is repeated. So, Ved, would you like to go first? Do you have something to add on this?
Well, I guess like me personally, I don't need any tools, but I've heard about people that use all kinds of stuff. Like, yeah, like people that would use like a magic wand or like pills or any item pretty much, just like Night Owl said, of a jetpack to fly. And I guess yeah, like it does help, especially if you try control and you mess up the first time, to just start trying out all kinds of other ways to do the control, including tools that can help. So yeah, like you don't need them, but be open to use them, especially if you messed up control in the same dream, because it might work out with the tool.
Nice, thanks. Curious, do you have something to add?
I'm always going to play the card of the same way you talked about schema and the same way that you talked about expectation is. I'm just going to imply when it comes to the idea of dream control, you really need to figure out whatever works for you. When it comes to achieving what you want to in a dream, the same way it applies in real life, I feel like the strategy in which you approach that could involve that intermediary, or it doesn't have to. But that really depends on the degree in which you want to facilitate that idea of control. And secondly, the degree of which you need that as an understanding from a bridge to, from the expectations and the connections, the associations that you already have, and the new connections that you're going to be building during that dream.
Nice, thanks. Does anyone else have something to add to this specific question before we move on to the next one? I will take that as a no. So, next question comes from Henry Harrison and says, how easy is it to return to the same dream scene repeatedly while lucid, even on different nights, i.e., using lucidity as a way to resume a dream partway through? And that sounds kind of like a persistent realm to me. To make use of acronyms and confusing definitions as this community does best. But does anyone have something to say to this response?
So I don't think it would be easy, but it's definitely possible. And personally, I've returned to the same dream on the same night, not as much different nights.
I would want to jump in and say it might be a little bit difficult for you, but I wouldn't want to set that expectation in anybody's mind, because the guidelines I say for a persistent realm can be very variable, as in how specific does that realm that you're in need to adhere to the last dream that you've experienced. If you have a very simplistic dream, or maybe you've set that environment in a lucid dream yourself, I would imply that if you really have your intent to it and you imagine that it is simple enough, you are going to be able to transfer that to the next dream in the same way that you can elicit dream control in any other dream.
Nice, yeah, thanks. I'd like to add that so this sort of ties into, as I said, persistent realms, which is just the definition that tends to be used for dream world that you come back to over multiple dreams, which doesn't necessarily have to be the exact same dream scene. So I've had multiple definitions of how this can work. I can't think of them off the top of my head, how they're technically supposed to be called, but there's like one idea behind it, which could be you can make it like a video game where you sort of go back to a checkpoint almost, which I found interesting. But one of the things which I also found interesting to notice, especially in my own dreams, was that sometimes you can return to the same dream world and there's nothing specifically telling you that it's the same dream world other than the fact that it feels like it's the same dream world, not necessarily the same scene. However, I also believe that it is very easy to go back to the same scene. Sometimes, well, you did mention on different nights. I feel like going back to the same dream scene repeatedly tends to happen very often in DEILD. More acronyms, here we go. Dream Exit Initiated Lucid Dreaming, which is where you just sort of wake up after a lucid dream or after a non-lucid dream, and then you enter super fast wild into a lucid, and it allows for some nice incubation of the last dream you were in or a new one. So I feel like that's where things like that tend to happen. But I think there's nothing at all stopping you from doing that normally, especially if you're like trying to do a story or a specific plot. And I also wanted to touch on the fact that this can also happen in non-lucid dreams. Recurring dreams are a thing. I don't really have personal experience with it. I mean, I have non-lucid persistent realms, but not like recurring, not as in it's the same exact place. All right, well, does anyone else have something to add to this specific question, or should we move on to another one? All right, we can move on to another one. So from the same person, we have, doesn't lucidity equal total control? And they then add, at least in the few times I remember being lucid, I always had total control. This is quite an interesting one. So first of all, I feel like we could go two ways with this. We could just go straight into it, or we could be like, what is total control? And then we could probably go at this for hours, but how do we want to take this question? Who wants to start off with answering it?
Yeah, I'll start. So I've heard this before a number of times, people saying they have total control. And yeah, then I just ask, what do you mean by total control? And nobody controls everything. Like, it's just nobody controls everything. Like if you think you control everything, I think that can actually be useful to believe that you control everything. I think it can be a good way to control the dream and get things going and keep them going. But nobody has total control.
I was going to imply that the same way we say that the unconscious is 90% of our minds, right? To some degree, I would say that the dreamer is also in some aspects. I might want to bring up Robert Wagner's quote again, but really, whenever you're walking around in a dream, I wouldn't imply that you necessarily have total, full control over everything, every aspect of everything that's around you. The same way that when we walk around in our own world, we are perceiving things through our senses. The dreamer is going to make that possible, right, through our senses. Just it's inside a dream. So again, it really depends on the definition of total control. If you mean that nothing defies expectations or doesn't mean a trigger, I could see how that form of total control might work. But there's always going to be that idea that the dreamer is sitting behind the dream, followed by your consciousness.
I mean, I believe that the definition they're thinking, at least what I think someone means with total control, is that they have the ability to control whatever they want, not that they're controlling everything at that moment. In the same way that you could say you have, well, let's just call it total control over your body because you can like move your limbs around and jump or whatever. But just because you're not jumping at this exact moment doesn't mean you don't have control to do that. So I'm thinking total control just means being able to do whatever you want, not constantly always doing everything.
Yeah, that's probably what they're talking about. Which I wouldn't call that total control personally.
What do you
yeah.
call it?
I'd call it control of some kind, but controlling every single aspect of the dream, I think, is counterproductive, and I've never heard of anybody doing that. I'm really skeptical when people say they do.
I mean, yeah, I'm not saying like control, literally the whole setting. I'm just saying like the ability to do what you want. You know, like you could change your setting if you want. You could fly if you want.
Yeah, and I also doubt that as well, because most people are working within their desires, their schemas, what they expect, and rarely will they actually move outside that into the base mechanics of the dream, and take an awareness approach, which is like, well, how deep can I go into this relationship with this dream character? Not just like simple experiments of like, oh, what do they know? How smart are they? But getting into the essence of the experience and diving deeper into what makes these dreams tick. And people have experimented with feelings, emotions, and like, I'm going to experiment and do all these crazy things, but typically when I get into a dream, it's like I want to experience something new, an aspect that I've never seen before. And so I feel like what a lot of people, when they're controlling things, it's usually stuff they've done before or adjacent to stuff they've done before. It's not a lot of exploration, which teach their own. Like, to me, that's boring, and I just don't. It's something I'm not interested in. And I think that's also led to like the chaos of my dreams, where I don't have persistent realms. I don't have persistent dream characters most of the time. It's hard for me to maintain scenes. It's taken me a long time to develop that. So that to me is the trade-off. It's like, would you rather have a lot of fun doing these stories that you want to experience, or do you want to like pull out the wiring and go talk to the architect and then pull out the architect's wiring and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Nice, thanks. Does someone else have something to add? Sorry, my voice is dying. All right. So I notice a sort of call to action here that we all need to announce that people should subscribe to the YouTube channel recently created, Lucid Dreaming Initiative, but it's just spelled LD Initiative, which is going to be the official channel for the Lucid Dreaming Initiative stuff, where we will hopefully be able to live stream soon more Lucid Deep Dive content in the future, as well as other content, super interesting stuff. This sounds so cliche. I can't subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
What do I say? Someone say something.
For all the audience who has attended live, thank you very much. We very well appreciate that you've come over here, even though we've tried, we pinged the entirety of events in Dream Cafe and nobody came and we didn't have any panelists. But if we regard that, if we just push that away, thank you very much for coming. It has been an amazing adventure, and thank you very much for the questions for anybody who has posed them. We hope to see you on the next Saturday of the month, right? It's the first Saturday of every month, correct?
Yes, it is the first Saturday of every month. And yes, indeed, thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. We're going to be doing some more stuff on the side of just incredibly long live streams soon, so stay tuned for that as well. And thank you to everyone who's on the panel as well for showing up. We had some great discussion. I feel like we could definitely have gone deeper, and we will one day, no doubt about it. Except the discussion that we did get to was great. Mm-hmm.
But before we pick up, like, maybe I might want to say a few words, because there's something a little bit special about the fact that we're all here right now. Just remember, just imagine for a moment that your life is a dream, right? Not in the metaphorical sense where days blend into each other, you know, the rest of that, right? Where they blend into a haze, but in the literal sense, for dreams, the rules of reality, they don't apply. Because your limits are no longer set by the physical world, it's set by the mind. So this concept, dream control, it's not just a phenomenon of our sleep. It says something for living our lives to the very fullest. Because in the realm of dreams, we have the power to fly. We have the power to conquer our fears, right? To face our deepest anxieties head on. And what if I told you that you could harness the same power in your waking life? Because dream control, it shows us that with awareness, with the intention that we have to control our dreams, we can shape our realities. I always say, have a dream world. That's an extension of our waking life. So, maybe the next time you're living your life normally, or you're inside a lucid dream, why don't you bend those seemingly rigid structures of your lives and embark on a journey of self-discovery? Your mind is the architect of your reality. Just as in lucid dreams where the dreamer becomes aware that they're dreaming and can influence the outcome of that, you want to awaken to the realization that you have the power to influence your very life's direction. And the first step to that change, the first step to change in your life is awareness. Wake up.
Just don't look in mirrors.
I'm going to bed.
Hey, come on, what is that? Sorry. Okay. Okay, we're good.
All right. Is this where the stream ends?
Yes,
Last
of
time
course.
we left on an inspirational thing. This thing. It was something.
I hope the music was audible enough. Okay, no, the stream hasn't ended yet. We're still live. We should probably...
No, let's just have the debrief like on live. No, okay. But
I think we're good.
how do we even end the stream?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
You're supposed to be in control. No, we were supposed to. Wait,
They already
who said
left.
that they should do it?
This is so funny.
Wait, who
We
said
can't
that
end the
they-
stream.
I'm scrolling up.
Okay. Everybody just leave. Okay, I think
No,
we can
wait,
reconnect
because then
on deep
every
dives.
lives are empty, right?
Does that happen?
Maybe.
I don't think
Wait,
we can
let
end the
me-
stream.
No, who said they could do it?
Amina, she left.
No, but who said that? Who responded to Amina
Someone
leaving,
else.
saying that
I
they
have no
could do that
idea.
when Amina wasn't there?
Hmm.
Oh, Tetsun. Wait, no.
Well, I'll just leave.
Well,
Okay, have
It's been
fun.
great. It's been real.
Okay, bye.
Oh, finger.